Good evening, Life Group leaders. Tonight you're going to be speaking through this whole thing of a connected heart. It's this idea that my heart and our hearts are connected to each other, that we're not flying solo, we're not out on a limb, that we're actually there for each other, and we kind of have this covenantal type commitment to each other. In other words, it's a firm commitment, and it's a commitment rooted in Jesus Christ, and we're connected to each other and committed to each other for mutual benefit. I'm just going to work through some of the questions I've asked, or all the questions I've asked, that you can take your group through this. But here's the heart of this. You want to understand the Church of Acts in its own context. In other words, you want to understand the scriptures and the church in that context in that day before you start translating those principles into your own life. So you say, here's the principles of this community, and then you can say, this is how these principles play out in us as a life group, as a church community. So if you read through Acts chapter 2, 42 to 47, and Acts chapter 4, 32 to 37 together, you'll immediately start to pick up a number of characteristics. And this is your first question, which is, read these passages together. What were the ingredients of the Church of Acts connectedness? So as you go line by line, verse by verse, you're going to pick up the different principles of this community and understand that community for itself before you start making translations into our own context. So here's starting from Acts chapter 2, verse 42. The first thing that jumps out at me is that they devoted themselves. In other words, they were committed to growing together, and every person took ownership of the fact that they needed to be committed to this community. What did they devote themselves to? The first thing was teaching, which is, how do we grow in the Bible? How do we grow together and understand God and His Word? Second thing, fellowship. And fellowship isn't just hanging out, but it's having friendships with Jesus at the center of them. In other words, Jesus is the center of this friendship, and because He's the center of this friendship and He's the point of connection, He's really the glue that keeps us together. The next thing is meals. Hospitality and eating food together is such an important part of community. And the last thing is prayer. The next thing that jumps out at me is that there's this deep sense of awe, which is respect or reverence. They understood that they were part of something special. In other words, they valued what they were part of. And then it says that they shared what they had, whether it was food and meals or money. There's incredible acts of generosity in this community, and so that they were able to meet the needs of the other people in their community. And then the last thing says that it gives me this picture, this sense that they were just in each other's lives. They didn't have neat boundaries where I go to church and life group, but their lives cross-pollinated. They were seeing each other almost every day, eating together, hanging out together. And so they did life together, and they really journeyed together in their relationship with Jesus. When you read through Acts chapter 4, 23 to 24, it says that they were united in heart and mind. And the sense of heart commitment and unity commitment, they knew what their purpose was, that they knew what they existed together, and they were driving or working towards the same thing together. There's another picture of shared everything they had, which we've already got in our list. And then there's this willingness to share Jesus, that the apostles taught Jesus, they taught the gospel. And when you're in a community where you're willing to share Jesus, and you want to see people come to faith, and you want to see people meet Jesus Christ, it's such an exciting thing to be a part of. So that's understanding the Church of Acts in its own context. And now the next question is, what would this connectedness look like in our context? How could you live this together? And so this is taking these principles we've just discussed and really applying them to yourself. So this is kind of how I do this. I'd work through this list. Devoted themselves. They were bought in. They wanted to be there, and each of them made that decision. How committed are we as a life group to being here for each other, to showing up, to actually pitching, rather than getting that better call, that more convenient thing that comes up, and we choose that over life group. Second thing, teaching, fellowship, meals, and prayer. That they learned the Bible together, that the friendship with Jesus was at the center of what they did, that they ate together, and that they prayed together. How many times as a life group leader, when you're praying for each other, do you end up doing all the praying? But when you understand that as a community, they devoted themselves to prayer, that each one of them said, man, I want to be a part of praying in this life group. I want to pray for the people in this life group and share in their journey. It becomes a really special thing. This awe, that they valued the chance God gave them to be a part of something special. And it's really a great question. It's a hot question, actually. We've been doing Waking the Dead, this hot series. And the hard question is, how much do you value the chance you get to be a part of this church and this life group? The next point, as I said, that they shared what they had. And in our church, we've had incredible acts of generosity. We've had people pay for other people's education and help get them a job, buy groceries for them when they were retrenched or had lost their job, people who've bought other people cars or given away cars, really amazing things. But there's more than just that. You get to share everything you have, and what you have is your homes. You have your vehicles, and some guys need lifts to life group. You've got contacts in a work context, so someone else needs a job and you can help make a contact for them. There's time. So often time is our most valuable resource, and it's actually the one we can be the most stingy with. But these guys, whatever they had, they shared, and so we can encourage each other to the same kind of generosity. This whole thing about neat boundaries is so often we like to have this line and distinction. That's my church life and this is my other life. But the early church didn't seem to have that distinction. It's like Jesus was a part of all their life, and everything was colored and tainted by the mission of Jesus. And so try and connect and try and form connections and Jesus friendships outside of just a life group, or if there's someone in life group who you see is struggling, make a time to connect with them outside of that, and a time for coffee or whatever it is, just to connect with them. It says those were united in heart and mind, and try and get your group, give them the sense that you're building the same thing together, that if the life group is going to function well, everyone needs to be involved. Everyone needs to be united with heart and mind, so this life group can really work well. And then the last thing is a willingness to share Jesus and encourage people to share their faith. And every time someone says, man, I brought my friend to church, or I managed to share my faith with someone at work, celebrate it and just go, man, that's so awesome, that's so important to us as a community. And so what you're doing is you're taking the principles from Acts and you're going, how does this play out in our context, and really creative ways of really fulfilling the same principles in our day-to-day lives. The third question you're going to look together as a group is, what struggles do we have to overcome to live this way? And so often we get this rosy picture of the church of Acts like it was the most perfect church ever. It was a phenomenal church, but they had their issues. In Acts chapter 6, you've got this dispute that broke out between the Jewish widows and the Gentile widows, and the Gentiles were saying, hey, our widows are being overlooked in the distribution of food, and they had to fix that problem. You had Paul and Barnabas who had such a big argument, they didn't work together anymore, they parted ways. You've got Paul who had to urge two ladies that he had worked with to be reconciled in Philippians chapter 4. And so in all these passages, you've got real tension and real issues that people had to work through. So this question is designed to help people realize what they need to go through in order to build a better community. So often I've heard people complain about the church sometimes, not necessarily ours, sometimes ours, other churches, and going, man, this church was like that and that church was like that, and I didn't have this kind of community here. But the reality is, if God's put me in this church, I'm responsible to build that community. One day when I stand before God, I'm not going to say that person, that person, that person. He's going to say, cool, but what about you? And so for all of us, we need to ask the question, what can I do to contribute to community? And fundamentally, community only works when people are selfless, when they put other people's needs above their own. Philippians chapter 4, verse 2 to 11 is a great text to work your way through in preparing for this week. And I'm just going to read the first few verses. Paul says this, don't be selfish, don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. And he then goes on to explain what that attitude was. But that line, don't look out for your own interests, but take an interest in others too, is this idea that how do I use what God's given me to serve you? How do I use what God's given me, whether it's a gift of teaching or hospitality or administration, or maybe you're just a person that loves to have fun and you're like, man, I want to have fun with these people, let's have fun together to build this community. But what has God given you to serve the people around you? And when every person asks that, rather than what I'm getting from this community, but what can I give to this community, community starts to flourish. Encourage your people. It's a great time to encourage people to get involved in serving in our church, to be regular and committed to a life group, and really encourage them to give their hearts and lives to being connected and to doing this journey together. I really trust that as you dig through these scriptures and you go line through these two texts I've given you in Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4, that the Holy Spirit starts to speak to you and encourage you to be that kind of community, and for each person in your group to say, man, I want to play my role in building a great community. Guys, I really trust that you have a great life group night, and happy leading. Thanks.